Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: the difference between life and death. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres calls for aid trucks to be allowed into Gaza immediately as he visits the Rafah crossing.
Hope that there will be a future, and hope that one day there will be peace with a two-state solution, with Palestinians and Israelis living in peace.
At least 18 Christian Palestinians are killed in an Israeli airstrike as its bombardment of the besieged enclave continues. Meanwhile, Israeli military chiefs say they believe most of the country's 200 hostages being held in Gaza are still alive. It's the difference between life and death. That's the warning from the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres as he visited the Rafah border crossing, where hundreds of trucks loaded with aid for Gaza remain stuck. Conditions in the Palestinian enclave are deteriorating, with Israel blocking supplies of water, electricity, food and fuel. The total blockade was ordered in response to the unprecedented attacks by the Palestinian group Hamas earlier this month, in which over 1,400 people were killed. After nearly 2 weeks of bombardment, Palestinian officials have raised the death toll in Gaza to over 4,000.
These trucks are not just trucks. They are a lifeline. They are the difference between life and death for so many people in Gaza. And to see them stuck here makes me be very clear. What we need is to make them move to the other side of this wall, to make them move as quickly as possible and as many as possible.
Well, crews have been working to try to repair the bomb-damaged Rafah crossing as relief organisations hope aid trucks will soon be able to pass through to Gaza. Let's talk to our correspondent Yasser Hakim on Egypt's Al Arish on the border. Yasser, what's the story at the border now? What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
It's empty. It was really packed during the day. There were expectations that the UN Secretary General arriving there and giving a statement would actually mean the beginning of the delivery process. And there were a lot of people there around the border area and the volunteers and the media as well, bracing for the opening of the border. However, he left with the border still closed, and obviously the work has not been finished yet. So the border now is quite empty. There's not much activity over there. And we left there because we were told that they will be closing down. I think they will be continuing the renovation work that Egypt says will be needed to be able to bring the trucks inside, because what's damaged are the roads that's linking both sides as well as inside Gaza on the border, and therefore the trucks cannot go through and pass. Egypt has insisted and confirmed several times through its foreign minister and president that the border is open from Egypt's side, so that Egypt is not the one that's trying to close the border or deny the access to humanitarian aid, but that the problem lies with the Israeli side for bombarding the Rafah border from the Palestinian side, and this bombardment has damaged the area and is not really safe for the lorries or the trucks to pass through. Now, the UN Secretary General has voiced the concerns and the frustrations within the region as well, by saying that there are calls to quickly get the humanitarian aid in. He did also say something that might be of concern to many, which is not just the work, but he said there are conditions and complications for opening the border. So he did not clarify what conditions, what complications, and he left it so vague that people are still not clear. Will it be open tomorrow if the construction work is done and the renovation of the border is done? Will it be open tomorrow, for example, or are we talking a longer period? There are hopes that it will be opened on Saturday, and now what remains is just to get a confirmation on the exact date.
Yes, so very, very briefly, Egypt is set to host a major summit on the conflict tomorrow. What more are you hearing about that?
Okay, we know that the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is already in Cairo, the UN Secretary General, and they're both expected to be there at the summit on Saturday, along with leaders from other countries in the region, Turkish, Qatar, and others. This conference is focusing on two points, the ceasefire and a permanent peaceful solution, how to have a permanent peaceful solution that would avert the what we are seeing now again, that it would happen again or that would continue. So a ceasefire and a full solution is the main focus of the summit, because the aid should be there by then, it should be moving by then, and this summit was meant to be for the longer term, to how to put an end to this conflict and end to all the loss of lives on both sides.
Yes, so thank you for that. Our correspondent Yasser Hakim on Egypt's Al Arish. Well, meanwhile, Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip, levelling an entire neighbourhood after giving families a half-hour warning to evacuate. It comes as Gaza officials say at least 18 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on one of its oldest churches in the besieged enclave. Our correspondent Noor Harazin is in Gaza. Noor, the United Nations now saying humanitarian aid expected perhaps in Gaza in a day or so. What will that mean for the people of Gaza?
Well, actually, talking to the citizens and the civilians here in Gaza, the people on the ground, they have lost hope, lost faith, especially that over the past days, Egypt has been saying that the Rafah border will be opened. They are hoping that the humanitarian aid enters the Gaza Strip. However, nothing is happening actually on the ground. Yesterday and after several Egyptian officials said that the Rafah border will be opened on Friday, we and many other journalists and crews went there to the Rafah border. However, it was calm. The only thing that we heard is the sound of Israeli tanks shelling on the eastern side of the Rafah border. We also saw some trucks on the Egyptian side, apparently some reconstruction in the Egyptian side of the border after several Israeli strike that pounded the Rafah border over the past days. This situation, the humanitarian situation here in Gaza, is dire. We have been saying this for days now. People have hardly any access to water, food. Now the markets are almost empty. The shelves are empty. We're seeing people fighting over food in the markets, or whenever there is someone who is donating food for families who are taking shelter in hospitals or in schools. Even the water tanks at some of the UN schools have run out. Water tanks here at the hospitals. I am standing inside the Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital. The water tank that hundreds of families were refilling the water bottle from here ran out a few days ago. So the situation is dire, and the only thing that the people are wishing for is to actually for the Rafah border to open, and especially that Egypt has been promising over the past few days that the Rafah border will be opened and the aid will enter the Gaza Strip.
And Israel's airstrikes, meanwhile, continue. What's the latest?
Well, an ongoing Israeli airstrike struck the Gaza Strip today and also during the night. We're talking about Israeli strike in northern Gaza, in central Gaza, in eastern Gaza, and southern Gaza. So many cities and refugee camps around the Gaza Strip have been hit by the Israeli warplanes over the past 24 hours. One of the most, let's say, hard strikes that happened here when an Israeli warplane struck a church. It's called Saint Pervilios Church, and actually this is one of the oldest churches here in Gaza. It's like 1,616 years old church here in Gaza. There was hundreds of Palestinian families who were also taking shelter inside this church. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 16 Palestinians were killed, Christians and Muslims. This only makes the people here in Gaza feel unsafe no matter where they take shelter. If it's a UN school, if it's a church, a mosque, a hospital, it does not matter. That's why many people started going back to their home that they fled a few days ago in northern Gaza and also in central Gaza City.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Well, let's take you now to Israel and talk to CGTN's correspondent Ross Cullen, who joins us from Tel Aviv. Ross, you've been hearing from the defence minister, who gave a clearer picture, perhaps, about the Israeli Defence Forces' plans. What's he been saying?
That's right, Jamie. Yoav Gallant has been speaking, saying that the war will be split into 3 parts by the Israeli Defence Forces, beginning with what's already started, the airstrikes, and that widely anticipated ground incursion. Then the second phase would see defeating pockets of resistance, and it is also anticipated that there would be a potentially long-running insurgency by Hamas fighters who have had a long time to prepare their defences, tunnels, hideouts, potentially setting up booby traps and IEDs as well. So the Israeli Defence Forces would need to deal with that, they say, on their second phase of any potential ground incursion. Then the final phase would be to cease responsibility for the Gaza Strip and also to create a new security reality for Israeli citizens. Yoav Gallant, the defence minister, saying that Israel does not want to reconquer the Gaza Strip.
We also had an update on the hostages being held in Gaza. What more do we know?
Emmanuel Macron, the French president, Jamie, has spoken to the families of some of the French hostages being held inside the Gaza Strip after having been abducted by Hamas during their atrocities on the 7th of October. The French president saying on Friday that France does not abandon its own. We are doing everything we can to obtain the release of and the return of our compatriots, saying France is at your side. Also, the Israeli authorities have given an update and they say that 20 children, so under the age of 18, are among the hostages, and they do believe that the majority of the hostages are still alive. That is something that is very delicate. The situation about the possible discussion of release or exchange, the liberation of those hostages, discussions and negotiations have been going on for several days now at the highest level, including involving the United States, because some of their citizens are among the captives, to try to secure the release.
Security was tightened in Jerusalem, wasn't it, ahead of Friday prayers? Has it passed peacefully? Have there been any clashes?
There have been clashes in the West Bank. Overall now, we have seen more than 75 people lose their lives due to violence from Israeli settlers and the Israeli security forces in the occupied West Bank. We have also seen major post-Friday prayer protests, pro-Palestine demonstrations across the region, in Amman, in Jordan, in Cairo, in Egypt as well. These demonstrations after the conclusion of Friday prayers, a chance for people to voice their anger, their frustration, and that is why there has been that focus from the Israeli security forces as well.
Ross, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ross Cullen in Tel Aviv. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we'll be talking to the British surgeon who spent much of his life caring for patients in Gaza.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The difference between life and death. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres calls for aid trucks to be allowed in Gaza immediately as he visits the Rafah crossing. Hospitals in Gaza were never an easy place to care for patients, even before this violence began. Our correspondent Noor Harazin reports on the impact Israel's bombardment is having on the besieged enclave's infrastructure as casualties mount and supplies run low.
The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital is the one and only governmental hospital in Deir al-Balah, Middle Gaza. With a capacity of 300 beds, the hospital has been forced to set up tents outdoors with dilapidated wooden beds for the injured. A number of other changes in the hospital have been made to deal with the catastrophic situation. The maternity section has been turned into an area for surgery, and the hospital's floors are spread with blankets to lay down the injured.
Some of the medical supplies at our hospital have already run out, and we have very little available for other supplies. So we'll soon stop being able to treat those who come here. It's also very hard to work while you're thinking about your family.
Dr. Abu Zahir says managing their personal lives is also a hardship for medical staff during the war. They are torn between treating the injured at the hospital or taking care of their displaced families. On Thursday, a doctor received the body of his sister while he was working in the intensive care unit at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital.
This hospital has received around 3,000 injuries and 800 killed up to this moment, which is also beyond our capacity. We're working under pressure because this is the only hospital in Middle Gaza. We usually only serve 300,000 people, but now we serve around 900,000 due to the high numbers of people who fled their homes.
Doctors at Gaza's hospitals have started performing first aid and stitches only to those with moderate to serious injuries. Those with minor injuries are left with the bandages and antibiotics. Usually during escalations, hospitals here in Gaza ask citizens to donate blood. However, this time is different. Hospitals have repeatedly asked citizens to donate fuel, water, any medical supplies that they could store in their homes. This is how bad the situation here in Gaza is. Noor Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.
Well, let's talk to Professor Nick Maynard, a consultant surgeon at Oxford University Hospital's NHS Trust, and over the past 15 years he's travelled to Gaza many times working with medical aid for Palestinians. Nick, welcome to the programme. Just working as a health professional in Gaza must have been challenging in the good times, if I can call it that, perhaps the best of times. I wonder what it's like for your colleagues there now.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. It's always challenging working in Gaza, but of course, hugely rewarding as well. And there are wonderful people to work with. But the circumstances under which they're working now are, as you can imagine, appalling. And they're working in a healthcare system which is on the verge of complete collapse.
Tell us what you were doing there and what you've been doing over all these years.
So I've had two roles over there. I've led a team of doctors from Oxford to teach medical students and doctors over there every year for nearly 15 years. And in recent years, I've also been working with Medical Aid for Palestinians to carry out and teach surgery out there. My particular specialty is cancer of the stomach and the esophagus, and so I've been helping them set up advanced cancer surgery services to treat those patients.
How on earth, as a doctor, do you care for or even operate without the medical supplies that we're hearing about are in such short supply?
So, I mean, they're always in short supply over there, but in times other than these, they have enough to allow us to do fairly major surgery, although we do have to use equipment which perhaps is not quite the same as we're used to over here. But now, of course, their supplies have either completely run out or on the verge of running out. They have virtually no more blood products left. They've run out of surgical gloves. So between operations, they have to wash surgical gloves and use them again. They've got very little water. They currently run out of fuel for their generators, so they have no electricity. In Shifa Hospital, which is the main hospital I've worked in, on several occasions in the last 3 days, they've run out of fuel. Their generators have stopped. They've been unable to run any equipment that requires electricity, such as ventilators, until they get a bit more fuel in. And they're now running them again, but they fear it'll run out again in a matter of hours.
Which patients are at greatest risk in the face of these conditions?
The only patients they can treat at the moment are victims of trauma. They are overwhelmed in their services, so they cannot treat all the patients with trauma. But patients with other medical conditions, such as cancer or diabetes or infectious diseases or heart disease, they really cannot treat at all. So those patients will not get any treatment. And even the trauma patients, they're now overwhelmed and are struggling to treat all of those.
We got a sense in that film of the harrowing conditions taken on by the healthcare professionals in that hospital we filmed in. I mean, it must be almost intolerable.
Yeah, and I'm talking to colleagues of mine on the ground several times a day or in messages. We can't always get telephone communications for obvious reasons, but I'm getting messages on a regular basis. Other colleagues of mine from Oxford are in similar contact with their colleagues. So we're getting a very clear idea of what it's like, and they are in a desperate situation. They're all working hard. Many of them have lost close family or friends who've been killed. We know doctors and nurses and medical students who've been killed in the last week. Some of the people I know very well are working, not knowing whether their families are alive or dead because they can't communicate them. So, and yet they're still working. They've been told to evacuate by the Israeli government, but they're refusing to leave. They're refusing to leave their patients, even in the knowledge that they may well die as a result of staying where they are. But they will not leave.
Sorry, you were supposed to travel to Gaza this weekend, I think. I mean, when do you think you'll go back? When will it be possible to get back in?
I don't know. You're absolutely right. I was meant to be traveling out today. In fact, we had a whole week of cancer operations that we were lining up to do. I'm in regular contact with Medical Aid for Palestinians, which is the wonderful UK-based charity who supports me going out there. And they are looking for volunteers and building up a team of volunteers, of whom I am one, to get out there as soon as there is a ceasefire and it's safe to travel. But when that will be, who knows?
Nick, good to talk to you. We wish you well with your work, and thanks very much for coming on the programme. Professor Nick Maynard, consultant surgeon at Oxford University Hospitals NHS Trust. Now, they take their name from the man viewed as the patron saint of carpenters and builders in China. They're called Luban workshops. Now they've been established in more than 20 countries around the world to teach skills from operating robotic machines to cooking to learning traditional Chinese medicine. It's all part of China's effort to invest in people under its Belt and Road Initiative. And its latest academy is thriving in Portugal. Our correspondent Li Jianhua reports.
It's been 5 years since the Luban workshop in Portugal was established. Jointly built by China's Tianjin Vocational College of Mechanics and Electricity and Portugal's Polytechnic Institute of Setúbal, this workshop, the first in Europe, has so far trained over 400 students in electrical automation and industrial robotics. Professor José Lucas has overseen the workshop's growth since 2018.
We received a large number of visiting students in 2019, not just Portuguese, but also many international students. This helped make our Luban workshop earn more recognition at home and abroad. We now have an increasing number of students. Many graduates have been employed now. Some went to companies in Switzerland and Spain. Others have entered large Portuguese companies. This is an excellent project.
Alexandre Geraldo has finished his 3-year training course and has got an internship with Portugal's The Navigator company, which makes paper.
Normally, I should have a master's degree to get my current job. I believe my learning experience at Luban Workshop helped me get the long-term internship. I've learned how to operate industrial robotics and automated equipment. I find the learning experience worthwhile.
The first Luban Vocational Center opened in Thailand in 2016. Since then, that number has grown to over 20 in countries mostly in Asia, the Middle East and Africa, providing training for over 10,000 people. The workshops have been named after Luban, a Chinese architect, master carpenter and inventor who lived 2,500 years ago. He's considered the patron of carpenters and builders in China. The hope is that all trainees will be inspired to be as inventive and resourceful while gaining tangible skills. Li Jianhua, CGTN.
The headlines again. The difference between life and death. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres calls for aid trucks to be allowed into Gaza immediately as he visits the Rafah crossing. At least 18 Christian Palestinians are killed in an Israeli airstrike as its bombardment of the besieged enclave continues. Meanwhile, Israeli military chiefs say they believe most of the country's 200 hostages being held in Gaza are still alive. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.